Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a couple of cards using Honeybee's Antique Layering Roses stamp set. This was part of their most recent release and I hadn't used it yet, and I decided to make my life difficult and use yellow inks with it. I was just in the mood for something different. It's kind of a habit or go-to to do, pinks, reds, etc. But I was like, ooh, yellow would be really pretty. And the only reason I say that it makes life difficult is this is the first time I'm using this set. I haven't used a whole lot of layering sets very often, and yellow ink is notoriously hard to see, But after some trial and error, what I discovered worked best for me was to stamp the outline of these images because they're all labeled, which makes my life a million times easier. But I stamped the outline first in my darkest yellow ink, which was Simon's CITRINE ink. And then once I had the outline stamped, it was a million times easier to line up all the corresponding layers. When I did it the first time, I just did all the solid layers because I wasn't planning on even using the outline. And it was harder to line them up because it was just yellow inks and more subtle. And I also have astigmatism in both my eyes, all the things. Anyway, this worked best for me. So you can use the outline or not. Totally up to you. And you can also stamp the outline in black if you wanted. I wanted to go more subtle. So I did the outline and then just worked my way through the layers. So I did the big solid layer. And with everything, I was working on like A2 sized pieces of cardstock so that I could flip it around and stamp everything a second time. And I was doing multiples because why not? And this is definitely the sort of thing you could just mass produce piles of these, and especially if you had more than one stamp platform, you could set up all the different layers and just go to town, like create tons, and all different colors. And my brain was just like going, I was like, ooh, we could do like a rainbow of roses. I just stuck with yellow. So because there are more layers than inks that I have 3 shades of ink. I had Citrine was my darkest, Sunbeam is my middle color, and Lemonade was my lightest. For what, I did the lightest solid layer in the Lemonade. The second layer of detail I did with Sunbeam. Then the third layer here, I was inking it up twice. Inking it up and stamping it twice with that same Sunbeam ink. So I'm getting a darker shade of the same ink. And you can do this regardless of what inks you have. Just layer them up and ink them up more than once. And then you'll get the darker shades. So that's what I did to get more shades of color. Even though, again, on video it probably doesn't show up as well. Because, again, I chose yellow. Me and yellow don't really get along when it comes to filming and taking photos. I don't know. But I still enjoyed making these. And they made me happy. So once I got to my final layer of detail with these roses, I used the Citrine ink again, so my darkest shade. And I don't know, there's something really satisfying about images like this, like as the layers come together, because at first it's like, oh, this is okay, But then as you add each layer and the detail starts coming out, it's like, oh, this is pretty. And it's satisfying. And you could also just stamp the outlines and color them. I thought about that too, but I was like, no, I want to use these layering stamps because there's no way I could have done this many images and then colored them all. It would have taken me 10 times longer. So for the leaves and the little stem for the rosebud, I did the same thing, but I had my cardstock just trimmed down so I could do a few extra. And I did the exact same process. I stamped the outlines first with my darkest ink, which was Simon's Field ink, and went along and just stamped, inked, stamped, inked, stamped. And then my solid layer is my lightest ink. So Sprout, inked it up, stamped, kept repeating that process. Like I said, you could just do this over and over. Set up a little station, sit in front of, put a movie on or something, and you could just have so many. So I did all those layers. And then my second layer, I did my medium color, which was Fairway ink. And because the leaves don't have as many layers as the roses, I was able to just do my final layer with the darkest, which was the Field ink again. And that was it. So quick, simple, easy. Once all of my layers were stamped, I used the coordinating Honeycuts wafer dies and die cut all these. And same thing, just did it all, mindlessly, one after another, quick and easy. So I have all my like pile of roses and leaves, all just happy, cheerful. And then for my background, I'm using the geometric lines stencil, and I knew as soon as I started doing this I should have used pixie spray. It's a really delicate stencil and there's all this detail, so I taped it to my cardstock, and as I was blending my ink over it, the fine lines are starting to move. So remove the stencil, put it in a box, and I sprayed it with pixie spray. You want to make sure you're well ventilated, or do this outside. It is winter here, it is cold, but in my little garage crafting space, I've got it very well ventilated. So gave it a few light spritzes, let it sit for like a minute, and then it's nice and tacky, and it's just a light tack, but it holds stencils perfectly. Like, it worked perfectly. And I have a thing for geometric stencils. I don't know what it is. I adore them. So I blended, this is surf ink, over this onto some sea glass cardstock, and I just lightly blended it. Didn't worry about it being perfect. Kept the color more to the center. And yeah, I was working on the piece that I'd wrecked. Cardstock has two sides. Flip it over. Use the other side. I did the same thing with the roses. The ones I had experimented with in the beginning that I wasn't happy with, flipped the cardstock over, stamped it. We're good to go. So with these backgrounds, after I'd stenciled, I added a little bit of splatter. I don't think you can see it on camera, but the splatter was necessary. I had a couple little like smears on it anyway, and this is a great way to cover that up. Plus, I like adding splatter. It breaks up the perfection. It draws the eye away from if there's little smears or mistakes, things like that, and it adds a little texture, and I don't know what it is. I get serious joy from splattering. So I repeated the process on a second piece of cardstock. And then with both of these, it was just that same ink smushed onto a little plastic palette, picked up with a wet paintbrush, and then splattered onto this little background. Easy. Just quick, easy, adds a little extra, interest. And then for my sentiments, I'm using the Inside Kindness stamp set. I have a piece of black cardstock. I grabbed a bunch of sentiments from this set, slapped them onto here, didn't worry about lining them up. That's one of the reasons why I love that Honeybee does the coordinating wafer dies for their sentiments, because then I don't have to worry about eyeballing and straightening, getting things stamped straight so that I can cut them out, with my paper trim or anything like that. It's like, meh. I can just stamp it or emboss it like I'm doing here, and then I'm going to die cut it. Saves me so much time and aggravation. So I white heat embossed several sentiments from that Inside Kindness stamp set, because I wanted some for the outside of the cards as well as the inside of the cards. And then I'm going to use the coordinating wafer dies to die cut them. But first I just removed the excess anti-static powder on the cardstock just with a cloth. And I forget, one of the Honeybee design team members mentioned this in our group about tracing around the wafer dies with a Sharpie pen. Brilliant idea. I forget who it was that, said that, but brilliant. I totally had forgotten about this. I've done it with a couple other sets, but things escape me. If you store your wafer dies on like magnet sheets, you could use a little, instead of a Sharpie, you could use one of those poster paint Sharpies, like the white ones, That would work as well, because especially die sets like this where there's 50 dies, and you never know, if you're missing one or if they're going to fit back on the sheet. Because when I pull multiples off, then I'm sitting and trying to puzzle piece them back onto the sheet. You know what I mean? So tracing them out, game changer. It makes my life so much easier. It's so much easier to put everything back, and I'm not getting frustrated and just throwing them back in the package. And that's usually how I end up losing them. So just another random tip of the day. So I die cut all of those sentiments with those coordinating wafer dies, so they're all nice and heat embossed and die cut all fabulous. And I didn't die cut extra layers. This is one of the few times I decided not to add a ton of foam tape or anything. You can get the look of dimension without actually creating a bunch of bulk if you don't want to. So with the card on the left, everything's just sitting there. Nothing's adhered into place. I sat and fiddled and kind of figured out how I want to arrange everything. And then I used that as my guide to adhere everything to the card on the right. And this just made my life so much easier. So I just kind of followed it along, adhered everything into place with my Honeybee Precision glue. Once I got that adhered, I didn't put the sentiment on because I'm going to add more splatter. And then I repeated the process with the one that nothing was glued down on. And then I put these in my splat box to add just a little bit more splatter. Not necessary, but I just wanted to. Like I said, it just adds a little extra something. So I just used a little bit of white gouache, stuck it on my palette, added some water, and then splattered. It's subtle, but that's what I was going for. I didn't want to go, too crazy with the splatter. But it just adds that little extra bit of little, highlights and dots and texture and whatnot. So picked that up with my paintbrush and splattered this over both of these cards. And then I let that completely dry, which didn't take very long because I didn't add 15 layers of splatter like I usually do. So that little bit of splatter didn't take long. Let that dry. Then I flipped over my cards and trimmed off all the bits that are hanging over the edges of the card bases so that these will fit in a standard A2 sized envelope. And then I adhered my sentiments. I purposely left the sentiments off while I did the splatter because I didn't want to get splatter on the sentiments, because sometimes, especially when it's like a white heat embossed sentiment, white splatter can end up, obscuring the letters, etc. So that was there was a method to the madness. So I adhered the sentiments to the outsides of the cards. And then on the insides, I had already planned on using some of these roses. That's why I had also stamped so many, because I was like, ooh, I can have extras. So I can put them on the inside to give it a little extra something. So I did the same sort of a thing, just kind of arranged how I thought I wanted to put them on there. And then just adhered them into place again with just that Honeybee Precision glue. So rosebud, stem, couple leaves, the larger rose, and then my sentiment, got that adhered into place. And then same thing, I can flip that over, trim off whatever's hanging over the edge of the card. And then my final little bit of embellishment is some Honeybee gem stickers. I am so glad that there's now multiple sizes. I've been asking for this, or like hinting very strongly for months now, how badly I would like the gem stickers to come in multiple sizes. And I'm already struggling like not to hoard them, but I did actually use some. So I used some of the Hugs and Kisses ones, and I pulled out my older pack of rainbow ones just to get some yellow in there and stuck those onto the cards, and that finished them off. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have pictures in the blog post. I'll have a supply list with links to everything I use to make these. So you can check that out below if you are interested. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, for thumbs upping, leaving comments, subscribing, all of it. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.